Thank you for giving me the chance to host this, right? My name is Henrik von Scheel. I'm here to elaborate with you for the next timeline on what is the latest book that Paul, Emma, Tesha, and Eva came out with, the future work, quite relevant today, and how do you actually apply today? So what I will elaborate with you over the next time is what does the book contain? What did the authors think about? Who are the authors, and why did they come forward with that thinking today? And then we can discuss a little bit some of the unique concepts that are in the book and how you can actually go forward and try to apply it today. Personally, I'm the originator of the fourth industrial revolution. I think this is the most disruptive period of time we have as a human being in work and whatever, right? And whatever we are working with will change. And I think the book is really relevant because the book highlights some key concepts on what is changing and some unique ideas on how to approach it. So let's introduce the authors that have authored the book. Let's start with Paul. Paul was the one that kickstarted it all with the 5 guys. And I think you are probably also the best that can introduce the team from a different element on how you got them on board and why you got them on board and what you had an idea, right? Because it's all your babies, but you were somehow the igniter to say, okay, let's write a book, guys, all right? So tell me something about yourself and a little bit about the guys.
Thank you so much for the introduction. I'm Paul Alovich. I'm one of the co-authors. And my background is in management consulting. I have been working in the growth markets for the better part of my career. For the past 15 years, I've been working with some of the industry juggernauts in Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and this portfolio includes companies like Aramco, Sadara Petrochemical, Do Telecom, Emirates Nuclear Energy Corporation. One thing that's common for these large enterprises and organizations as well as nations, everybody wants to develop a perspective and to have a peek into the future. What future holds when it comes to how the work will change, how the dynamics of the workplace will evolve over a period of time. And that was basically part of my consulting work for the better part of the last 10 years. And that was, the root cause behind getting this idea to kind of offer a glimpse to the broader audience in terms of what we as a team, as an organization believe is going to be the future of work. So yeah, definitely looking forward to today's discussions and happy to pass over the mic to Emilia.
Thank you, Paul. Hello, everybody. My name is Emilia Vukovic. I am the co-founder of Agile Dynamics Tech. I'm also working with Paul on many consulting projects that we are developing. I'm currently running Supercluster dedicated to the Web3 blockchain technology. It's first of its kind in the world. And I'm the president of Serbian Blockchain Initiative. My sweet spot is blockchain in healthcare. That's something that's I'm really fond of that topic. I'm also a doctor of medicine, and I did my master thesis in computational finance. So I worked on many global projects that are dedicated to modern technologies, AI, and blockchain. I was inspired to be part of this project because I think we really need to prepare ourselves better. I don't like the theory of that the robots are going to take over and everything's going to be that we are going to fail. I think we need to take the most out of it, and that we'll actually live in a really good period of time that we can use everything that is happening now and to be our force and our driver for better tomorrow. So once again, I need to thank Professor Henrik for hosting this panel for us today. I enjoy our discussions, and every time I learn something new from you, and I adore your books. So thank you so much for being part of this discussion today, and maybe Tesha can continue.
I'm principal at Agile Dynamics, focused on strategy, execution, communication, marketing, change management, and operation organizational performance. Through my career, I also worked in media, and during my work in media, I had passion for the global politics and world economy. And as we see today, the world is changing in front of our eyes. So I wanted to find out what is exactly changing and how the future will look like. And that's how we got into the research that created the book.
Thank you for organizing this. As was already said, I have been building software for 22 years now, the last 9 in Web3 space, and since 2017 I have been operating a venture builder company focusing on emerging technologies. So the idea behind the company was we should discover emerging technologies before they become popular and invest in startups building on top of them, and that mostly worked out well, for us. That's also how I ended up meeting with the rest of the team here and also contributing and working together with the Agile Dynamics crew, mainly on the consulting side. I'm also currently involved with several, blockchain projects who are going in the same direction, and some of them also trying to enable AI and the future of technologies. I was also very happy to be in a position where I can have a book together with Tesha Teshanovic, primarily as I'm a big fan. And that is what brought us here, I believe.
So writing a book, you normally have a purpose, why you write it, who should read it, and what are some of the core content in it, right? So Paul, when you read the abstract on what the book contains, right, who did you write it to, and what are some of the key ideas that you have in the book?
So that's an excellent question, and the answer is somewhat, more complex than one would think. So essentially, the book is built and designed for anybody who wants to take a strategic view of the future. So essentially, it could be a fresh grad, it could be a business leader. The catch is, for the fresh grads, it's gonna be a bit of an abstract content, because they lack the understanding of the environment, and their perceptions are based strictly on what they have learned about the context, rather than to have a personal experience. So to answer your question, the book can be read by pretty much anybody who's interested in a topic, but the better position would be who's going to benefit the most. I think it's business leaders. Business leaders will get a better, understanding of what's going to make a difference. In our humble view, that is going to be around the methodology, approach, how do we work together, rather than what tools do we use. So our point of view, I'll kind of share some of the glimpse in the future, is technology is enabler. Technology is not necessarily going to drive the future of work. It will enable it, it will empower it. But what really is going to be different is how we work together as people.
It's actually interesting that you say it, right? Because when I read the book, I actually had the clear view that there's a view on it, right? You actually go through the trends and the drivers that drive the companies outside and inside, right? You had a clear view on how technology will affect it in terms of AI, in terms of decentralization, in terms of upskilling. You had a clear approach on saying, what are the areas that are not working really well? And we actually have to take the box and reshuffle it, right? We have to think about incentives models. We have to think about, so you were shuffling it a bit to say, what if, right? So that sparked me a bit in that, right? So Ivan, you were the one that covered the AI topics, right? So what will be the new role with automation and artificial intelligence? And what is it what leaders need to think about?
I wouldn't say it was just me, but from this perspective of us trying to figure out different scenarios, about what can happen from the business side once you have a new technology that is actually in place. I think that is something that is really important for everyone to read, know, and understand. Of course, we are looking at it from our own perspective, from something we have been researching and trying to implement over the years, and where do we see this going. But I viewed the book itself, primarily as the conversation starter, and after that, we can discuss in many cases like specific pilots that we did, or that even maybe we didn't do them, but we heard about them and know about some of the results, etc. And to me personally, the book is mostly about thinking about this future at all, and trying to position yourself to go where the ball is going instead of where the ball is today.
Do you have a view on how AI will impact work?
Well, that's a good question. I think that generally, viewing it from my own perspective, I do believe that we are going to have this big shift towards creative professions, not just in terms of like art or writing or extremely creative work, but anything that requires a lot of clerical work, will be taken over by AI and individuals who know how to run it. Because I believe that in the future, this might lead into a direction where we have less big companies. When I say big companies, I mean companies with a lot of employees, because managing people is always an overhead, and managing computers is less of an overhead. So I hope that this will actually lead into a new type of entrepreneurship where you have smaller groups of people, doing work of big corporations, but we actually end up with a lot of small businesses that actually run with huge financial returns.
I actually like the view that you took on the roles in the book in reality. So AI by design is the automation of intelligence. And when you are automating something which is already non-core, so everything in systems, you're automating for cost savings. And you're automating
yes,
the
and a lot of people, when I talk about this, they also say like, yes, but a person he'll still do this better or whatever. And I usually reply that it doesn't really matter, because with a person, you might need 3 to 5 iterations to get where you want, and you might need several weeks to have those iterations. But with AI, you can have 1,000 iterations between 5 minutes. So, your ability to reach the end goal, might be brute forced in a way. And at that moment, that doesn't really matter. So for many things that will not require creativity, in these jobs, but might be reached through different levels of, through a lot of automation, etc., they can also be pretty much brute forced. And that's why I believe that we will definitely see a period in time where we'll have more and more new types of innovations that we didn't actually see before.
Let me jump over to Tessa. You are like this blockchain guru, right? And
more of a media guru. Ivan is from the blockchain field, and Emma, and I'm a kind of a newcomer in blockchain. I came in the blockchain sphere a couple of years ago.
No worries. We rename you to the wannabe guru then. That's also good.
Thank you.
Right? So you looked at the roles for upskilling and downskilling, right, in your research, and what was your conclusion?
The skill gap represents a significant challenge for the future of work. It might be actually one of the main problems of the 21st century, potentially inventing the industries and economies for fully harnessing their potential. According to the research by the World Economic Forum that you worked with a lot, Mr. Henrik, organizations have identified skills gap and challenges in attracting talents as primary variants hindering industry transformation. Around 60% of the surveyed companies have highlighted the problem of bridging the skills gaps. That is one of the problems that is preventing them from doing the digital transformation. So since the companies identify skills gaps and talent availability as the primary barriers to the transformation, investing into training could be the most promising workforce strategy alongside the automation. Another important point that I would like to point out is that it's estimated that estimating the extent of disruption of the job markets by AI is extremely challenging. There was a report by Goldman Sachs that I read during the preparation for the material for this book that said that as many as 30 million jobs could be lost and are altered by AI in coming years. However, after reading that report, I'm not really sure what methodology they used to reach that conclusion, since they didn't really outline it in the report.
It was probably AI-generated report, so.
Yeah, probably like many of the things that we read nowadays. in order to prepare for this book, I needed to read a lot of different reports, a lot of different books. And it's not the fact that we wrote this book, but I must say that this book is excellent because we have managed to gather some of the information and some of the findings that you won't find in other books related to this subject, because a lot of them are just copy-pasting from one another. Yeah. And in the end, let me just say, by the report from Accenture from 2024, it's established that 40% of the total working hours could be affected by the large language models that Ivan mentioned, and due it to the due it to the fact that 65% of the work is in a lot of the companies related to the language-related tasks, that could potentially disrupt the market of jobs. Now the question is, and that is the million-dollar question that I don't have an answer, that World Economic Forum doesn't have an answer: how many jobs will be created by the AI? Because we know that there will be the destruction of the jobs, but how many jobs will be created? And second question, which you have outlined in the questions that you have asked, what are the skills that would be required for those jobs?
So quoting your own book, right? This is what I learned from Paul last time when I met Paul, you know, the first time being an author, right? Kick ass. So he's quoting his own work, and I love that, right? I actually really love that, right? So looking in your own book, right? So what you talk about upskilling and reskilling, right? There's a golden line, which is core skills of ability that all people need, right? And you actually elaborate on that. You elaborate on the core skill that all need is project management, right? That's the ability for you to reskill and for your ability to upskill, right? So wherever you move within the industry or in the organization, the core skill that you need still is actually project management. Then you need expertise skills, right? And that's one of the elements that you mentioned, right? One of the elements that you also mentioned in the book is saying, how is it that you can work differently within teams as project management, right? So I think that was for me just a kickstart of thinking to say, right, of course, right, there's still hope. It's not like we will be replaced. We need to reskill ourselves in core competencies so we can talk about the same thing and work in projects. A company is by design nothing else than projects of a portfolio, right? That's actually what you describe here too. So Emma, right, you're like the queen in health and AI, right? And we just moved from AI to the skilling, right? You cover topics that are quite heavy by design, right? And so how does the future work? How does AI, how's the adoption in AI in healthcare? And what they can actually use for? Because healthcare is actually well defined in the skills mapping.
So first of all, I'm not participating in any more interviews or podcasts if you're not giving the introduction and giving the questions, because I love when you're approaching me this way. Thank you so much, Henrik, for the question. I would just make a small differentiation here, because we are talking about AI all the time. So just a little note, AI is a computer software, and basically the idea is to mimic the way that humans think. In order to perform some complex tasks. That's analyzing, learning, reasoning, and similar. Machine learning, meanwhile, is a subset of AI, and it uses algorithm trained on data to do some general concepts. So I'm noticing that everybody's talking about AI quite openly, but to be quite honest with you, we are not even that close to artificial intelligence in the full definition of what it means. So everything that we are using now are more or less machine learning programs that are trained on many data, and we are using them for our specific needs. I found one survey very interesting. It was interesting knowledge for me that there was a science study that was conducted by the Technology and the Future of Health, and there was over 1,000 patients who were in that pool, and the questions were quite simple. Would you be comfortable integrating AI technology into your healthcare? So basically, who would you trust more, AI or a doctor? And maybe you would presume that the younger people have more faith into robots and AI modern technology. Actually, Generation Z was with the highest percent. I think it was over 80% of them would completely trust AI over a doctor with their medical diagnosis and healthcare treatment. But the thing is that if the situation is getting more complicated, so as much the issue is getting more complex, you're going back to a human. And I think AI even was talking about that earlier. Actually, AI has an ability that I don't like. And I don't like it in humans, not even in machines and AI. And it is that it gives you just as a solution. And we covered this topic also in a book. It doesn't give you an explanation why did it choose that solution that he's offering you. Why does he think that's the best response there is? So as we said before, for some things, I completely think that we need to optimize them. I think that optimization can help us a lot. But in the end of the day, critical thinking, it's still something that for me, it's in top of the pyramid. But I agree with everything that's said, and I think that organizations may need to be more adaptable, more flexible, and more agile, actually, in all of this space. So I think that the future of work, and as I said, we covered a lot of this in the book. I think it will require the whole new talent acquisition strategy. So we will need to attract individuals with the right skill set for the future. And that's why I think it's important that we open up these topics and we write these books and collect these documents, because this all could involve leveraging data that we are using with AI-driven tools. But we will need to identify the talent gap that's for sure is going to happen. And we need to target our candidates with obviously with diverse background and experience. So the future skills profile may require organizations to embrace remote distributed workers and to access the talent pool that's beyond their traditional boundaries in every sense. First of all, geographical. So I think that's something we need to think about now.
Paul, you are like this gunslinger, and you know what? When I read the abstracts of the titles, right? The future work, fusion teams and tribes. Why doesn't the mafia need HR, right? I need to know what you mean with that. A decentralized workplace, digital central culture shift. Holy macaroni, that's a big topic, right? Why choose synthetic equity on blockchain over the stock of paper in rotating performance, right? Wow, that means you are actually thinking about to rechange the incentive model, right? If you could do that with tokenization, right? The role of performance in circular economy. I think that's the idea you had with pirates, right?
Well,
that you elaborate. And let me just finish that the last couple of one, and then I have a question.
Sure.
Because I need to tell the listeners, you know, there's more meat on the bone, and it covers the broad range on both skills, technology, on rethinking, right? Then the last two main, the conversion of business and technology and the well-being of the new GDP, right? So what did you actually mean with why doesn't the mafia need HR?
Sure. So yeah, the book is actually a journey, you know. We want to immerse the reader into this, you know, thought process that essentially is going to open some new perspectives. So the world is much bigger, you know, than the place that we're born into. So one thing that I would really like to put on a table is that regardless of your current position, you know, never stop moving, you know, start evaluating your options, start thinking about alternatives. There is always an option, regardless of how good or how bad your current environment is. Whatever is good, it's not going to last forever. And same thing goes for the bad, you know. Bad things don't last forever. So things will change. So be cognizant of these changes. Try to predict and understand. We're placing our bets on the growth markets. There is a very, very, you know, strong indicator from the macroeconomic perspective that growth markets hold the massive potential that will, you know, be the future of business opportunities. So Latin America, Africa, Asia, the dominance of Europe and North America is obviously not going to disappear overnight, but it definitely will be a different place from what we are, used to in the 90s or early 2000s, or, even, the contemporary times. So when you look at it from that perspective, you really need to be prepared to operate in a very different environment. So look at mafia, like they started in Sicily, and now they have been thriving, for many decades in a new world. So what made them so successful, essentially, just to cut to the chase, and again, not sure how much, controversy we can introduce, let's stick with the PG-13. But ultimately, what made them so successful is their inherent avoidance of complexity. Mm-hmm. Complexity is extremely toxic to any organization. And in business, where the stakes are very high, that's even very going to be very, very, detrimental to their success. So first thing that really is important is you need to minimize the complexity of the organization. You need to minimize the tax on your business operations. So that will lead to cut out of any intermediaries. The message needs to trickle top down in a very concise and a very effective way. So Mafia is a fairly flat organization. If you look at the job profiles of Mafia, after, the head, you have capos, and then, a few lieutenants, and then soldiers. So it's no more than 4 organizational levels. And ultimately, what I was trying to message to our audience, HR is a representation of the bureaucracy. The way we look at the future, most of the work that is currently occupying HR professionals is going to be automated, delivered through ERP solutions in a self-service model, through different applications, and it's going to be, very, very technology-driven. The parts of the strategic work that HR is doing is definitely something that will have to be picked up by the line managers. So in terms of hiring, recruitment, development of the employees, succession, that's something that will have to land with the management, and they will have to take ownership and accountability. And that's what's ultimately going to drive the performance, where you start removing all the excuses why things are not the way they should be, and by empowering people to be accountable, and most importantly, to give them the necessary authority in balance with the accountability. So what does that mean? Don't expect me to deliver over-the-top results and then chain my hands. So yeah, I'm ready to go, and make things happen, but make sure that I have the necessary authority to make the right calls. So that's what's happening in criminal organizations. The other thing that really makes a difference in the underworld is incentives. Fair pay for the fair prey. So that's ultimately leading to equitable pay, because at the end of the day, if you really look at the mafia or pirate crews, in terms of the pay equity, they're very inclusive, they're very equitable in terms of the distribution of the pay. The amounts that go to the top leadership and soldiers is usually never more than ratio of 3. And ultimately, that's how they secure the loyalty and, most importantly, the performance within the organization. So those are some of the lessons learned. Again, just a caveat, we're not encouraging any criminal, activities here. We're just using some examples from these organizations that are very transferable and very applicable in the business world.
Yeah. Paul, you're actually hitting the hammer on the nail, right? Because there is a challenge in the market, right? There's a challenge in the market that there's too many organizations that are top heavy, that the incentive model, that companies get richer and richer, but in most countries, people are unable to supply their own family with one salary, right? So the disconnect of what you deliver and there is actually quite apparent, right? And it's not an apparent solution that they just thought of. It's an evolution that happened over years, right? And sometimes if there happens more and more disruption, they need to have a thinking to say, oops, what we evolved 20 years and we just evolved, is that still a model that works, right? So that's why I like the thinking that you bring in and how do you do that, right? So you're talking about incentive models, you are talking about rethinking the layer of authority, how far off you are from delivering value. So you talk about portfolio and project management, how they're interconnected together, right? And then you, Ivan, you're talking about blockchain, right? So digitalization, tokenization of assets, incentive models, right? How would that work in terms of the future work, right? Does that even add any value?
Yeah, well, you know, as I mentioned it in the intros, you know, I have been more or less 80% of my time has been spent in, you know, building different types of distributed systems over the internet. So obviously blockchain is the best one that we currently have in that space. I would say that there are two thoughts to be shared there probably. One of them is that the current version of the internet is extremely reliant on advertising and on basically companies now owning huge segments of data that they can use to train these AI models on. If you look at what is currently being said around all of this, is that basically most companies or individuals that have been actually creating content, you know, are very pissed off that you know, the internet just provided the ability for these AI companies to just scrape the data, and in many cases, because those companies are actually the big players such as Microsoft, they already had the data readily available to train their models, and people who are actually authors, you know, are feeling left behind. And because in the current version of the internet, you know, the people who are creating the content are not getting compensated for it, you know, that is probably going to change from a generational standpoint. You know, there is going to be more and more need for these people and more and more desire to actually own their own content. And the second thing is, it was not covered in this book, but I also spoke quite a lot about the ways that open source and closed source communities or corporate development and open source development became the same thing over the last 20 years or so. And, you know, the ability to tokenize things actually gave us a way now first to create a new monetization strategy for open source software that is currently actually a new way for us to think about developing software in the future. And obviously now it started in software space, you know, primarily around money, etc. But now it's transferring more and more into digitalization of different types of real world assets. And I believe that especially Emilia and Paul, they took the lead in this regard, and they fell in love with the tokenization of real life assets, you know, and that became something that they are extremely passionate about. I'm, as a washed up former software engineer, I'm still more interested about the impact, you know, to the open source space. However, you know, the ability for us to move real world asset tokenization from the computers and you know, move it into real world assets is something also extremely exciting, and I expect, you know, to see a lot of changes in this regard over the next 5 to 10 years.
Thank you, Ivan. I already sense, being a technical guy, you're totally on full speed on your passion, right? So just to elaborate a little bit, you know, when I read the book, part of tokenization and digitalization of assets never really came into company in a professional way to really do that, right? And what I saw in the book, what you've done and what Paul and Emma is doing, is that they're taking a view to say something that actually really works. How can you deliver it in a way that a company can consume it, right? And how can they apply it in terms of tokenization and all of this, right? I've known Paul for, I think, a couple of months, and I'm seeing him dancing on tables and selling the ideas because he's passionate about it and he knows how it works, right? And so in terms of having an infrastructure and have this a purpose how to apply something is gold worth, right? And so it's a good description in the book how you do that, right? Because the normal blockchain technology not applied is worth nothing. So that is what Paul is doing, right? He's doing something where he takes something and adds value to it, right? And that's what I like about it, right? So I just added some words in your mouth because I know you're already loaded with excitement. So, over to you, Tesha. I wanted to go through with you a little bit about the digital nomad, right? Now we talked about digitalization of assets. We talked about all of these things, right? People have been on and off on work, right? How do you see the digitalization and the digital nomad? How do you see that evolving?
Well, we firmly believe in cooperation of digital nomads. One of the underlying themes of the book, like Paul mentioned, is the pirates. Why? Because Paul hasn't elaborated that, but pirates had a specific reward mechanism. They shared the loot, and the loot was shared based upon their performance. If you manage to get the loot, we have gold for us. If you don't, we all die of hunger. And that is a kind of a metaphor for modern digital nomads. Of course, we are not trying to promote any kind of criminal activity. The core idea behind the fusion teams concept that we presented in the book is the idea that the profit should be shared because people need to see the sense of purpose in their work. So the future work lies in the fusion teams, who represent a new approach to the value delivery. Unlike the traditional bureaucratic organizational structures that are based on business functions, the fusion teams are multidisciplinary. And that's where we see the value in all of these millions of digital nomads that are working remotely from all of these different continents. We believe that there should be some kind of a synergy between them, and that there should be different ways of organizing digital nomads to a decentralized unit that could help them to develop their own capabilities and offer their solutions on a larger scale. So that's a project that somebody should work on. Currently in Agile Dynamics, we are not working on that since we have too many different projects at the same time. We also firmly believe that the future work lies in decentralization, that the decentralization will enable the fairer distribution of power and the fairer distribution of the rewards by dismantling traditional hierarchies and fostering the greater collaboration and creating the systems of the open innovation, similar to the open source community that Ivan is, open source co-developer community that Ivan is passionate about. And we also firmly believe that Web3 is accelerating this shift that is helping the world transform to a better decentralized way of work. However, we shouldn't confuse the decentralization with disorganization. The centralized structure is still structured, although with a flatter hierarchy with a few layers of bureaucracy.
Very good. Very good, right? I'm just going to recap a little bit, right? Ivan talked about digital assets, digitalization of tokens. That means within a company, you can digitalize your assets, your workflow, your assets like money. You can incentivize people. That's what you were talking about, right? And so there's a huge box that has been opened there, right?
Yes,
Decentralization. Then you open the box
Yes.
on security. Web 3.0, you open the box on privacy, right? So you open boxes that people have been talking to, but they've been unable to connect them, right? So with tokenization, digitalization, right? Web 3.0, you are connecting the dots of the doors that they want to open to add more value to the employees and to the outside world. So I really like that, right? So now
just to add, sorry to interrupt, Henrik. Just to add, the key, sorry. The key to it all is the reward management. The technology will facilitate new era of rewards and benefit program by tokenizing work. And that's why, besides this book, we have dwelled upon the idea of synthetic equity. The tokenization of work is the key factor that will enable the connection of all of these free agents, digital nomads, and different stakeholders in the market.
But this is actually the topic that Paul is normally passionate about, but I'm joined to see that you're passionate about, right? Because right, the incentive model and the synthetic versus the tokenization, Paul, right? That's some of these elements that you talk about when you talk about this, the aspect of the private, of the pirates scenario, what you learn from the pirates, what they did, and how you can use that in organizations, and what could be the benefit on that, right? Could you elaborate a little bit on this? Because for me, this is a key opener, right? key opener for what Emma is explaining about rethinking, thinking critical about something which is apparent to everybody, it actually doesn't work very good.
So essentially, what really comes down to is equitable distribution of the value throughout the organization. And as you know, the business becomes more complex, as you know, the work environment becomes more difficult to really understand. You know, so 9 out of 10 people will struggle to explain how their large corporation really makes money and creates value. So what I'm trying to say here, it's really important to cut through that complexity and connect the dots in terms of what level of performance will lead to value creation and how will this value be distributed among the key stakeholders and contributors in equitable way. So what we are propagating here with synthetic equity, which is essentially decades-old methodology based on the phantom shares, which is a deferred cash payment, is essentially as an employee, as a contractor, as a stakeholder, I want to have a very clear path to my earnings based on my performance. That's what it really comes down to. How do you do that? You need to make a very clear, easy to understand, easy to explain approach and methodology where everybody's going to understand how the organizational, business unit, and individual performance contributes to the overall success. And that is, you know, the solution that we captured in technology, synthetic equity, which is essentially tokenization of the work. So just by taking a glimpse at your app, you will understand how the value of the token goes up or down, how this contribution in terms of the success between, you know, your overall organization, your business unit, and your individual contribution leads to success. That's what really comes down to. It has to be very visual, very tangible, something you can put a finger on. That's really important. And that's what ultimately is going to drive the engagement. Having HR go into the dark room in the back office once a year, come back and make announcement about the short-term incentives and come back like, you know, with some very overly complex long-term incentives that nobody understands. And most importantly, you know, the trigger for the payment is going to be something in a long, you know, on a long stick, is really not going to make a difference. That's why we believe, you know, that having like, you know, this deferred cash payment solution is the answer, you know.
So how do you think if somebody who listens to this and they bring it to their organizations, how should they actually approach that, right? To say, how would they go about it?
Sure. So, I mean, Web3 community is well versed in this concept because a lot of projects are incentivized through tokenization. So you get tokens as part of the reward scheme. The difference is usually these are very small teams and the token is driven through marketing and hype. It's not necessarily correlated directly to the performance of the organization. So the way it works in the Web3 world, everybody's basically going to CoinGecko, trying to see how well their token is performing, and then calculating their vesting period to see how soon they can exit, cash in, and leave. That ultimately leads to a disappointment. Everybody's left in tears because as you have like, you know, a large population of employees dumping their tokens, that takes like, you know, the token to turn down. And, you know, the community is disappointed to see that, you know, the employees are dumping this in the market. So there are some mechanics how to manage that. But the point I'm trying to make, it's not really a solution because it's not connected to a value creation. So what we're encouraging founders, you know, business leaders, make sure that you have a proper incentive scheme that is connected to the overall performance. That is the key. In other words, this is going to be a cost-neutral solution that is going to distribute portion of the extra revenue and profit created over a period of time to the key contributors. That's the magic. In other words, if you take analogy of the pirate ship, once we take that Spanish galleon, how much gold bullions can we take? How we distribute these gold bullions. And we're going to distribute them once we take the ship down, not in 10 years. So that's what made pirates as some of the most productive teams in the world. very simple, mission-oriented, and pragmatic.
You actually solve one of the biggest challenges that has been around for the last 20 years, Paul, right? I've been studying the outperformers and underperformers, right? This is one of the key elements, how you connect strategy with execution. And most companies fail because they define objectives and it's unable to be implemented. Either the objective is not defined correctly, you cannot report it, or the incentive is not correct, right? So if you have these three parameters and you cannot connect it together, they're disconnected, right? It doesn't matter how much you beat on the drum, right? And you solve that, right? With smart contracting, you solve that with your platform solution, you solve that with the new thinking on your incentive model, right? Actually, a really, really smart approach, I should really say. So Emma, if somebody wants to buy the book, right? Why should they buy the book?
So first of all, I think that today we emphasized enough that the leadership development programs may need to evolve. And we need to prepare leaders for the challenges that are going to come. To be quite honest with you, completely transparent, I think this is such a small investment for the value that you're going to gain if you buy the book. This book stands basically as a call to action. So it's out there for the readers to be a point where you can open a discussion about it and just to think about it in the sense of how is my organization going to look? Is it really possible that we are going to have small companies with small number of employees that are going to be unicorns? And just to think of all of the transitions that are coming, because we actually came together to basically create a comprehensive guide that's going to serve us as a blueprint for the future of the workplace. I think it is important to prepare now and to look at these transformative opportunities. So I would not say that this is something that's going to be challenging for everybody. And I know there's a lot of aversion, especially in traditional industries. So from my experience, when I'm negotiating with pharmaceutical companies, with governments, so with all of the industries that are a little bit more closed, it is like we are trying to make it that this is not going to happen, and it's happening already. So significant changes are already on the horizon. I think the book is basically a guidebook to this new territory where actually machines and robots work together to a shared goal, to make something that's valuable and something that's going to be beneficial for us also. The book doesn't end with robots taking over the world, and it's not telling you you're going to fail. It's actually teaching you how to scale.
Yeah. And you know what I like about it? You don't come with a solution like this is a Bible, 10 commandments written, right? You actually come and saying, you know what? These are some solutions that can fix the problem from A to B, and we can actually connect them together, right? I want to add something to that, Emma, right? When I read the book, there was something that looked out of it, right? It guides you through a journey of the challenges with some optional solutions and how you can conclude, right? So if you are an innovative guy that wants to read the book and get inspired, I think that might be the right one for you, right? If you are a consultant, right, either join Paul's team or get inspired by it, what he's doing, right? Because it's actually really cool, right? Because it's a pragmatic approach to something which is challenging. And I think for most organizations, when you are from an organization, the key for implementing the future work will be prototyping, right? The solution that you will come with in the beginning will never be the apparent solution, right? You have to test your way through it, right? And finding a partner that has an idea on how you can approach incentives, how you can approach information privacy, right? Might not be a stupid idea, right? If you're an entrepreneur, this might be a good book too, right? Because it has a visionary view to it on how you should do it with technology, how corporate works. So I think it's quite well an all-rounder, right? It's your first book, guys, so congratulations on you. And I think we can open up with some questions if somebody has some questions that are around here.
So he even took initiative. He already responded to all the questions in writing. Ivan, thank you so much. But yeah, I see a lot of friendly faces on the list of the guests. Just wanted to extend a shout out to Helen White, to Dion Growing, Miriam. Thank you so much for joining us from Singapore. I know it's quite late there. Also, I would like to thank our guest from Japan, Kyoto Ko. Sir, thank you so much for joining us. I think it's very late in Japan. Hope it was worthwhile. Yeah, to be quite frank with you, I think it's definitely an interesting topic that is going to be ever evolving. One thing that you have shared with us, Henrik, is that we don't have a conclusion in the book. Yes, because the whole point of the book is this is a merging of topics, and eventually what we are trying to achieve here is to continue developing the content, going a mile deep. Now we just wanted to set the stage, like, you know, go mile wide. And now we're gonna, in our next editions, explore particular topics. One thing that we have touched on but didn't really dive deeper is GDP is gonna change as the North Star for the success of nations. We believe that the well-being is gonna take over, because money ultimately will run its course, but it's clearly not the single measure of the success. I think people around the world are realizing more and more there is more to it than just, you know, the financial success. A good example would be, you know, a study that has been done, I believe, by Deloitte, that, you know, well-being as a composite index that includes financial success, health, as well as life work balance, as well as your social interactions, is positioning countries that are not so intuitive when it comes to you know, well-being. But at the end of the day, you know, they are leading the list. So those are the Caribbean countries, and then you would have, you know, Singapore, that is doing quite well off when it comes to financial side. But, you know, due to the stress and the nature of business environment, people are simply not spending enough time with their families. They are not really happy with their life overall, and that pretty much, like, you know, puts them in a difficult position when it comes to this overall well-being. So food for thought. Henrik, I know you were recently in Caribbean, so perhaps, like, you know, some first-hand experiences.
Yeah, they are far ahead, right? In the tokenization and being a digital nomad, right? That's what they are trying to do, right? But they're also trying to do it out of a need, because they're small.
Yeah.
And they need to innovate, and they cannot innovate in the big, so they need to innovate in the small, right? So I think that the blockchain community and the Web 3.0 community actually has a big potential to move forward in this, right? In some spaces, they've been a little bit dormant, right? And it needs a push on application in the business world, right? And the push for that is in the future of work for us. You've done a masterpiece. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Henrik, I would like to add something. When we think about the future of work, we must think about that the future, we must know that the future of work is about a war for talent. And that's one of the findings of the book. And what we need to win this war for talent, what companies need, is effective workforce planning. It's a crucial tool in winning war for talent that allows the organizations to strategically align their talent needs with the business objectives. And I think that Paul has something to say about those things.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of, you know, workforce planning, this is one of the crucial elements that is gonna, you know, separate winners from losers. And ultimately, our ability to predict how the future work will evolve is the key driver of the workforce planning. So absolutely, at the end of the day, what I believe is really gonna make a difference is that evolution of the incentives, rewards, and how do we make more equitable workplace. That's going to be the key driver. You know, I don't believe that you know, AI as well as, you know, automation is going to drive us out of the opportunities. I think it will empower us to capitalize on the opportunities, with even greater success. So one thing that I would also love to leave our audience with is the positive outlook of the future rather than negative. If you read, most of the material, it's quite depressing. I would like to really share our positive outlook. I think future belongs to those who dare, and it's really limitless. So really looking forward to tomorrow. And I would encourage everybody to take a positive spin and take action.
Thank you very much, everybody, for joining.
Cheers.
Thank you. Have a great day, guys.